I know exactly where I was standing when my daughter stopped belonging to me. Not legally, not officially. She was still my child on paper, still slept in the bedroom down the hall with the lavender curtains I'd picked out myself, still called me mom when she needed something. But the moment I'm talking about, the one I can't stop returning to, happened in Margaret's backyard on a Sunday afternoon in early October, and it had nothing to do with paperwork. We were at Daniel's mother's house for her 65th birthday. The kind of afternoon that photographs beautifully, golden light, paper plates with cake on them, Sophia running across the grass in a yellow dress. I remember thinking it looked like something out of a home goods catalog. I remember thinking I should take a picture. I didn't take the picture. Sophia had been attached to Margaret all day. That wasn't unusual. Margaret had a way of making herself irresistible to my daughter, always had candy, always had time, always crouched down to Sophia's level with this conspiratorial warmth that made you feel like you were being let in on something wonderful. I'd noticed it for years. I'd told myself it was good. Every child should have a grandmother who adores them. I told myself a lot of things. The moment happened when Margaret's sister, Carol, was trying to get a family photo. She was arranging us near the hydrangeas, Margaret in the center, Daniel to her left, me beside Daniel, Sophia somewhere in the middle, and Sophia pulled away from me. She crossed the small stretch of grass between us and wrapped both arms around Margaret's waist. Carol laughed. Look at that. That little one knows who loves her best. People chuckled, the kind of chuckle that isn't unkind, exactly, just thoughtless. And then Sophia looked up at Margaret with this expression I can't adequately describe, something between adoration and absolute trust, and said, clearly enough that everyone could hear, I wish Grandma was my real mom. The laughter that followed was louder. I felt something go very still inside my chest. Daniel glanced at me. A quick look, the kind you give someone when you're checking to see if they're going to make a scene. Margaret smiled down at Sophia and patted her head with one hand, and if I'm being honest, she didn't look surprised. She looked pleased. She looked like someone who had just received something they'd been waiting for. Oh, sweetheart, she said, soft and warm. I love you so much. She didn't say, that's not a nice thing to say about your mother. She didn't say anything that acknowledged I was standing 4 feet away. Carol said, kids say the darndest things, and just like that, the moment folded itself back into the afternoon. Someone refilled their drink. The photo was taken. I stood in it with my mouth in the shape of a smile and my eyes not quite matching. That night, after Sophia was in bed and Daniel was in the shower, I sat on the edge of our mattress and tried to figure out why I couldn't stop shaking. She's 8 years old, I kept thinking. She didn't mean it. But that was the problem, wasn't it? Because the thing about that sentence, I wish Grandma was my real mom, was the way Sophia had said it. Not impulsively. Not the way kids blurt things when they're tired or frustrated. She'd said it the way you say something you've thought about, settled into, decided. And I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd heard something close to it before. Not those exact words, but the shape of the idea. I sat there in the dark for a long time, telling myself I was overreacting. I was wrong. 3 weeks later, I would find the recordings. But to understand what they meant, to understand how a woman I'd spent 9 years trying to get along with had spent those same 9 years quietly taking my daughter from me, I need to go back to the beginning. Not the dramatic beginning, not some single terrible event, just the beginning, the quiet one, the kind of beginning that doesn't announce itself, the kind you only recognize later, when you're sitting in the dark trying not to shake. Daniel and I met at a hospital fundraiser. He was tall, steady, the kind of man who listens when you talk and remembers what you said 3 weeks later. I was 30, working in healthcare administration, recently out of a relationship that had taken more than it gave. He was kind. He was consistent. And when he introduced me to his mother 2 months in, she hugged me and said she'd always wanted a daughter. I thought that was the loveliest thing anyone had ever said to me. We got married. We bought a house in the suburbs north of Seattle, a craftsman with a wide porch and a yard that Sophia would eventually learn to cartwheel in. We had Sophia when I was 32, and Margaret was there. She was always there, eager, available, offering things before you knew you needed them. She was different then. Or maybe she wasn't different, maybe I just wasn't paying attention to the right things. The first time something made me uncomfortable, Sophia was about 18 months old. Margaret had taken her for the afternoon while I was at work. When I came home, Sophia was in Margaret's arms, and Margaret was feeding her something, little crackers with peanut butter. And she looked up at me and said, she was fussy, so I found something she likes. I'd told Margaret 3 times that we weren't doing peanut products yet. Sophia's pediatrician had said to wait. It wasn't a medical directive, just a precaution, but I'd been specific about it. She was fine, Margaret said, reading my expression. I raised 2 kids. I think I know when something is safe. Daniel was home by then. He was in the kitchen. She's okay, he called from the other room. Mom knows what she's doing. That was it. That was the entire conversation. I didn't push. I told myself it was a one-time thing, that the crackers hadn't caused any reaction, that Margaret had been watching children since before I was born, and maybe I was being uptight. I picked Sophia up. I said thank you. I went upstairs and stood in the bathroom for a few minutes with the door closed. I don't know why I remember that detail, standing in the bathroom, but I do. I remember because it became a habit. Over the next few years, there were small things. So many small things. Margaret buying Sophia clothes I hadn't asked for, tiny dresses, ruffled and pink, when I dressed Sophia in comfortable clothes and overalls. Not a crisis, just a pattern. Every Christmas, every birthday, every seemingly spontaneous gift. The clothes Margaret bought always seemed to come with an implicit suggestion that what Sophia had at home wasn't quite right. There were comments at dinners, gentle ones, the kind that left no surface to push against. Sophia seemed a little tired when I picked her up from school. Are you getting enough sleep, sweetheart? Directed at Sophia, but heard by me. I made her a real breakfast this morning. I know mornings are hectic for you, Emily. She was telling me she doesn't love broccoli. Some children just need a different approach. Each one of these comments was small, survivable, the kind of thing you can't reasonably complain about without sounding oversensitive. And whenever I mentioned anything to Daniel, carefully, not accusatorially, just trying to put words around the shape of what I was feeling, he had a version of the same response. She means well. That's just how she is. She's not trying to undermine you. And maybe he was right. I genuinely didn't know. I had no proof of anything except a feeling I couldn't name, a low-grade discomfort that never fully left. Sophia turned 4, then 5, then 6. The comments didn't stop. They just got harder to separate from the noise of ordinary family life. By the time Sophia was 7, she had started asking to go to Grandma's house the way other kids ask for dessert. Urgently, repeatedly, with a particular kind of longing that I could feel pressing against my ribs. It didn't happen overnight. I want to be honest about that. It crept in slowly, the way cold does in an old house. You don't feel the draft until one morning you realize you've been wearing a sweater indoors for weeks, and you're still not quite warm. Daniel started working longer hours that year. His consulting firm had picked up a major contract, and he was traveling 2 or 3 days a week, which meant I was the default parent more often, school pickups, homework, dinner, bath, bedtime. I didn't resent it. I genuinely didn't. That's the part that's hardest to explain to people who assume I must have been withdrawn or absent or somehow giving Sophia reason to pull away. I was there. I was always there. I read her books at night. I made her lunches with little notes tucked inside. I drove her to soccer on rainy Tuesday mornings and stood on the sideline in a raincoat drinking bad coffee from a thermos because she wanted me to watch. I was there, but Margaret was something different. Margaret was a feeling, an atmosphere. When Sophia talked about Grandma's house, her voice took on a quality I couldn't compete with, soft and bright at the same time, like she was describing somewhere that existed slightly outside of ordinary life. A place where the rules were easier, where nobody was tired or distracted, where someone had all the time in the world, and that time was entirely for her. I used to think, of course, that's what grandparents are. They don't have jobs and routines and bills. They're the fun part. I used to think that. The thing about Sophia repeating Margaret's opinions didn't start all at once. It started as a flicker. We were at dinner one night, the 3 of us, and Sophia was picking at her chicken. She'd started doing this, examining food suspiciously, sometimes refusing things she used to eat without complaint. I don't like this kind, she said. You've had this 100 times, I said, not harshly, honestly. Grandma says this kind isn't as good. She poked it with her fork. She says there's a better way to make it. Daniel kept eating. I looked at my daughter's face. She was completely sincere. She wasn't trying to be difficult. She had received this information from someone she trusted completely. And she was passing it along the same way a child passes along everything, as pure, unexamined fact. What else does Grandma say? I asked. Sophia shrugged. Lots of stuff. Like what? She looked up at me, and for just a second there was something in her eyes I couldn't read. Not quite discomfort. Something more like the reflex to decide how much to share. I dunno, she said, and went back to her food. I remember looking at my daughter's face in the kitchen light and thinking, She's keeping something from me. 8 years old, keeping something from me. I told myself I was imagining it, but I kept watching. The week after Daniel's mother's birthday, after the backyard, after the yellow dress, after the sentence I couldn't stop hearing, Sophia came home from an afternoon at Margaret's and she was quiet. Not the tired quiet of a child who'd had a good time and needed to come down. A different kind. Careful. I asked how it was. Fine, she said. What did you do? Stuff. A pause. Watched a movie. Which one? She told me. I nodded. I asked if she had fun. She said yeah. And then she went to her room and closed the door, and I stood in the hallway listening to the silence behind it, feeling something I couldn't name press against the inside of my chest. Later that night, I went in to say goodnight. Sophia was already in bed, turned toward the wall. I sat on the edge of the mattress and put my hand on her back, the way I always did. You know you can tell me anything, I said. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then quietly, without turning over, I know, Mom. But she didn't turn over, and she didn't tell me anything. I sat there until I was sure she was asleep, and then I went back to the hallway and stood very still in the dark, and I thought about the way Margaret's face had looked when Sophia wrapped her arms around her. Not surprised, pleased, like someone who had been waiting. I didn't know yet what I was going to find. I didn't know about the recordings, didn't know what had been said in that house over those years, didn't know how far back the pattern went or how carefully it had been laid. But I absolutely knew, that my daughter was keeping something from me. And that someone had taught her too. I want to be honest about Daniel. It would be easier to paint him as someone who knew exactly what his mother was doing and chose to look away. It would be cleaner. But the truth is more complicated, and I think the complicated version is the one worth telling. Daniel loved his mother the way some people love the house they grew up in, not because it was perfect, but because it was the first place they ever felt safe. Margaret had raised him mostly alone after his father left. She'd worked 2 jobs, kept the lights on, showed up. He didn't see manipulation when he looked at her. He saw sacrifice, decades of it. And I think part of him had decided, somewhere deep and unexamined, that he owed her something he could never fully repay. Which meant that when Margaret and I disagreed, when I pushed back or set a limit or tried to name something that didn't feel right, Daniel experienced it as a threat. Not to me, to her. I understood that. I even felt sorry for it. But understanding something doesn't make it hurt less. The first time Margaret openly contradicted me in front of Sophia, I'd been putting her daughter to bed for 8 years. It was a Thursday night in November. Sophia had a cold, nothing serious, just the low-grade sniffle that cycles through every elementary school in America starting around Halloween and doesn't quit until February. I'd given her children's medicine, told her no screens before sleep, set the humidifier going. Standard routine. Margaret had stopped by earlier that evening to drop off soup. She did that sometimes, arrived with food and an air of quiet necessity, as if the household might not manage without her. Which, to be fair, was not an entirely unreasonable concern on her part because Daniel was in Portland that week, and I was managing pickup, dinner, bath, and bedtime alone while working a full day beforehand. I thanked her for the soup, I meant it, but she didn't leave right after dinner. She settled in. She was still there at Sophia's bedtime, sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of tea, and when I called up the stairs for Sophia to start getting ready, Margaret called after her louder. Don't forget your vitamins, sweetheart. I left them on the counter. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs. I already gave her medicine tonight, I said, keeping my voice level. I don't want to double up on anything. Margaret looked at me over her mug. They're just vitamins, Emily, vitamin C and zinc for the cold. I understand what they are. I'd just rather not give her anything else tonight without checking first. A small pause, the kind that has weight in it. Of course, she said, you're her mother. She said it pleasantly. She smiled when she said it. And somehow those 4 words, you're her mother, landed like a suggestion that this was something I needed reminding of. I didn't say anything. I went upstairs. Later, when I came back down after getting Sophia settled, the vitamins were gone from the counter. I didn't ask about it. I told myself it meant she'd put them away. 3 days later, I found them in Sophia's room, in her nightstand drawer, with a little sticky note in Margaret's handwriting, take one every morning. Our secret. Love, Grandma. Our secret. My daughter was 7 years old. I sat on the edge of Sophia's bed, holding that sticky note for a long time. I showed it to Daniel that weekend. He read it. He set it down on the kitchen counter. He was quiet for a moment in the way that meant he was choosing his words. She just wants to help, he said finally. Daniel, I kept my voice calm. She told our daughter to keep it a secret. She probably just meant like a fun thing, a grandma thing. Sophia is 7. Teaching her to keep secrets from me is not a grandma thing. He picked up the note again. Read it again. I watched his face do the calculation, mother on one side, wife on the other, the arithmetic he was always trying to make work. I'll talk to her, he said. What will you say? I'll mention it, that it made you uncomfortable. It didn't make me uncomfortable, Daniel. It was wrong. There's a difference. He looked at me then, directly for the first time in the conversation. And I saw it, the flicker of something that might have been acknowledgement, might have been guilt, gone before I could be certain. I'll talk to her, he said again. He did talk to her, or said he did. Margaret never brought it up, and Sophia never mentioned it, and nothing changed except that I started feeling, in a new and more precise way, like I was outnumbered in my own house. By winter, Sophia had started finishing Margaret's sentences. Not literally, but she'd absorbed enough of the woman's phrasing that I'd hear Margaret in Sophia's mouth at odd moments. A particular word choice, an opinion delivered with a certainty that didn't belong to an 8-year-old, a judgment that had clearly come from somewhere outside of childhood. One night I was helping Sophia with homework, a simple reading assignment, a short story about a family. She was supposed to write 3 sentences about what happened. She wrote 2 sentences, then stopped and looked up at me. Mom, why do you work so much? I glanced up from the worksheet. What? Grandma says you work a lot. She said it simply, factually. She says that's why you're tired all the time. I put the pencil down slowly. Did Grandma say that recently? Sophia thought about it. Last Sunday, we were talking about I don't know about our family. She paused. She said some moms just really love their jobs. The way she said it, some moms just really love their jobs, I could hear Margaret's voice underneath it. The exact cadence. The softness that made it impossible to object to on its face, while the implication coiled underneath like smoke. I looked at my daughter. Her face was open, curious. She didn't know she'd said anything strange. I work because our family needs me to, I said carefully. And also because I'm good at it, and that matters too. Sophia nodded, already drifting back toward the worksheet. Already done with the conversation. I wasn't. I started paying closer attention after that. Not obsessively. I want to be clear about that. I was not yet the person who would crouch in the hallway straining to hear a phone call or check the timestamps on voicemails or sit in a parked car outside Margaret's house running through hypotheticals. I wasn't there yet. I was just a woman who had started listening differently. And what I heard when I listened was a pattern. Sophia came home from Margaret's on a Sunday with new opinions about bedtimes. Grandma says kids my age don't have to go to bed so early. She came home a week later with new opinions about screen time. Grandma lets me watch as much as I want. She came home after Christmas with a particular quietness, the kind that lasted 2 days. And when I asked what was wrong, she said nothing was wrong and then went silent in a way that felt deliberate. I tried to talk to Daniel about it. Again. This time he didn't say, I'll talk to her. He said, Emily, she's 8. She's going to repeat things she hears from adults. That's what kids do. These aren't just random things she's picking up, Daniel. They're specifically about me, about the way I parent. He looked at me with an expression I was learning to dread, patient, slightly pained. The expression of a man trying very hard not to say what he was actually thinking. You're reading into it, he said. I don't think I am. My mother is not conspiring against you. I didn't use the word conspiring. He exhaled, rubbed the back of his neck. What do you want me to do? And the honest answer, the one I didn't say, was, I want you to believe me, not fix it, not mediate it. Just believe me when I tell you something is wrong. But I didn't say that. I said nothing, forget it. And I went to bed and lay there in the dark for a long time listening to Daniel sleep, feeling the space between us in a way I hadn't before. The worst night came in February. Sophia had been at Margaret's for the afternoon. Daniel had picked her up and brought her home around 6. I was finishing dinner, nothing elaborate, just pasta, when Sophia came into the kitchen and stood in the doorway watching me. I looked up and smiled. Hey babe, how was Grandma's? She didn't answer immediately. Fine, she said. Then without warning, without anything leading into it. Mom, why are you never around? I turned from the stove. What? She was looking at me directly now, her expression doing something complicated, not angry, not sad, something more like confused. Like she was trying to work something out and thought I might have the answer. Grandma said you're really busy, Sophia said. She said you have a lot going on, and that's why you're not around very much. The pasta water was boiling. I could hear it. I'm around, I said. My voice came out quieter than I intended. I'm here every night. I take you to school, But you're not really there, asterisk, Sophia said, still not angry, reciting. Grandma said being around isn't the same as being present. Being present? My 8-year-old daughter, looking me in the eye in our kitchen, telling me I wasn't present. Using words she'd learned somewhere else, in a house down the road, from a woman who smiled when she said them. I felt something shift in my chest. Not breaking, something colder than that. A realization arriving like whether you'd been watching from the window, finally making it to your door. Sophia, I kept my voice steady. Did Grandma say anything else about me? Sophia looked at the floor. A flicker of something, discomfort, recognition, the beginning of understanding that she might have said more than she was supposed to. I don't remember, she said. It wasn't true. We both knew it wasn't true. Okay, I said. I turned back to the stove. I stood there stirring pasta that didn't need stirring, and I told myself to breathe. And I thought about the look on Margaret's face in that backyard, and Sophia's voice saying I wish Grandma was my real mom asterisk, and the sticky note in the nightstand, and the vitamins, and the opinions about bedtimes and screen time, and some moms just really love their jobs, and I thought, this is not scattered. This is not random. This is deliberate. After dinner, I was clearing the table, and Sophia's jacket was draped over one of the chairs. She'd tossed it there when she came in. Her backpack was on the floor underneath. And sticking out of the backpack's front pocket, half visible, was something I recognized. Her old smartwatch. The one Daniel had given her last birthday. A kid's GPS tracker with basic features, mostly used to call Daniel or me directly. She'd stopped wearing it around October because the band had snapped and we hadn't replaced it yet. I reached down and picked it up, meaning to set it aside. The screen was on, which was odd. It had been off for months. I pressed the button. The display was simple, but there was one notification I didn't expect, a small icon I hadn't seen before, a microphone symbol, and underneath it a number, 47 files. I stood in my kitchen holding my daughter's watch and staring at that number, and I didn't understand yet what it meant. But some part of me already knew. The watch had a feature I'd forgotten about, an auto-record function, triggered by sound above a certain threshold. It was meant to be a safety feature. If anything loud or alarming happened near Sophia, the watch would capture it. It had apparently been capturing things for weeks. 47 files. My hands weren't steady when I set the jacket down. I put the watch in my cardigan pocket. I finished clearing the table. I said goodnight to Sophia. I waited until Daniel was watching something in the living room with the volume up. And then I went to the bathroom, old habit, old quiet, and I sat on the edge of the tub, and I pressed play on the first file. The first file was 43 seconds long. Sophia must have been sitting at Margaret's kitchen table. I could hear the sound of dishes in the background, the faint hum of a television. And then Margaret's voice, close, warm, the voice I'd heard 1,000 times. Your mom gets frustrated easily, doesn't she? It's okay. Some people just aren't patient. It doesn't mean she doesn't love you. It just means Grandma understands you better. I stopped the file. I sat on the edge of the tub and stared at the wall. Then I pressed play on the second one. This one was longer. Sophia was crying, softly, the way she cried when she was embarrassed rather than hurt. And Margaret was comforting her, which on the surface sounded like the most natural thing in the world, except for what she was saying while she did it. I know, sweetheart, I know she made you feel bad, but you know you can always come here when things are hard at home, right? This is your safe place. Grandma's house is always safe. Things are hard at home. I pressed stop. I opened the third file. The fourth, the fifth. I sat in that bathroom for 2 hours, and what I listened to wasn't a villain's monologue. It wasn't dramatic. That was almost the worst part, how ordinary Margaret's voice sounded, how gentle, how reasonable if you only heard the tone and not the content. But the content, File 9, your mom and dad fight sometimes, that must be scary. You know none of that is your fault, don't you? Grandma will always be here. File 14, she didn't come to your recital last year because she had work. I know. I was there though, wasn't I? I saw the whole thing. I had been at that recital. I had been in the 3rd row. File 22. It's okay that you feel closer to me. That's normal. Some children just have a special bond with their grandmothers. It doesn't mean anything is wrong with you. Closer to me, the phrase planted, watered, grown over years. By the time I'd listened to all 47 files, it was past midnight. My back ached from sitting on the bathtub edge. I was completely dry-eyed, which surprised me. I'd moved past the part where tears were available. I was somewhere colder. I had been watching my daughter drift away from me for 3 years, blaming myself, questioning myself, wondering what I was doing wrong. And the answer had been sitting in a house 15 minutes away, sipping tea, being warm and available and endlessly patient, and telling my daughter in 100 different soft and reasonable ways that her mother was not quite enough. I confronted Daniel the next morning after Sophia left for school. I played him 3 files, just 3. I'd chosen them carefully. The recital one, the one about things being hard at home, the one where Margaret told Sophia she was Sophia's safe place. He listened, he didn't interrupt. When the third one ended, the kitchen was quiet for a long moment. "That's," he started. "Don't," I said. He looked at me. "Don't tell me she means well," I said. "Don't tell me I'm reading into it, just don't." He was quiet, and for one moment, one real moment, I thought I saw it. Recognition. The flicker of a man understanding that something true was being shown to him. Then he said, "She was probably just trying to comfort her. Sophia must have been upset about something, and Mom was." "Daniel," my voice didn't rise, I was past rising. "Your mother told our daughter that this house is not safe. She told her that I'm not patient. She told her repeatedly over years that she understands Sophia better than I do. That is not comfort, that is replacement." He looked away, out the window, at the counter, at the floor. "I'll talk to her," he said. It was the same thing he always said. I finally understood it for what it was, not a promise, not even an intention. A door closing. "There's a recording that has your voice in it," I said. "File 31, you might want to listen to it before you talk to her." I left the phone on the counter and went to work. I didn't ask him that night whether he'd listened to it. I already knew what File 31 contained. Margaret on the phone with Daniel, not knowing Sophia was in the next room with the watch on the table. Margaret saying, "She's too sensitive, Danny, always has been. Sophia sees it too, kids always know." And Daniel saying, after a pause that lasted just long enough to mean something, "I know, Mom, I know. I know." 2 words, not a pushback, not a correction. An agreement. I spent the following 2 weeks doing something I'd never done before in my marriage. I planned. Not revenge. That word still felt too large, too dramatic for what I actually wanted, which was something simpler. I wanted the truth to exist somewhere outside of my own head. I wanted the people who had watched me parent my daughter for 8 years, who had attended the birthday parties and the school events and the Christmas dinners, to hear what had been said about me inside the house I wasn't allowed to question. Margaret's 65th birthday had already passed, but her side of the family held a winter gathering every February. It had been on the calendar for months. Daniel's aunt's house, 40 minutes south. Everyone would be there. Carol, who'd laughed at the backyard. Margaret's brother. Daniel's cousins. The usual warm, well-meaning crowd that had spent years looking at me with faint sympathy, clearly aware that the daughter-in-law situation was complicated, clearly unwilling to say so. I made copies of the recordings, all 47. I organized them into a playlist, chronological, labeled. I borrowed a small Bluetooth speaker from a colleague and tested the audio quality in my car. I told Daniel I was looking forward to the gathering. He seemed relieved. The night arrived cold and clear. Margaret was already there when we pulled in, standing in the entryway in a red cardigan, her face arranging itself into the particular warmth she deployed at family events. She hugged Daniel first. Then she crouched down for Sophia, who went to her the way she always did, automatically, gravitationally. Then she looked at me. "Emily," she said pleasantly, "you look tired." "I'm well rested, actually," I said. "Thank you." She smiled, I smiled back. We went inside. Dinner passed the way these dinners did, noise and wine and overlapping conversations, children chasing each other somewhere in the back of the house. I ate. I talked to Daniel's aunt about her garden. I watched Margaret hold court at the head of the table and felt, for the first time in months, completely calm. After dessert, before people started moving toward coats and goodbyes, I stood up. "I'm sorry to do this at a family dinner," I said, and my voice was steady, which surprised even me. "But there's something I need everyone to hear. It won't take long." Daniel looked at me sharply. Margaret looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on her before, not quite fear, not quite anger. Something more like the recognition that something she'd kept carefully managed was about to become unmanageable. I set the speaker on the table. I pressed play. Margaret's voice filled the room. "Your mom gets frustrated easily, doesn't she? It's okay. Some people just aren't patient." I watched Carol's face. I watched Daniel's aunt. I watched Margaret's brother put down his wine glass. I let 6 recordings play in full. The recital one. The safe place one. The two where Margaret told Sophia in gentle and sincere tones that her mother didn't really understand her. The one with Daniel's voice. The room was very quiet by the end. Margaret said, "Those are taken completely out of context." Sophia was sitting 3 feet away, I said, wearing a watch with an automatic recording feature. There was no context being hidden. That's just what you say to my daughter when I'm not there. Emily, I was comforting her. You were replacing me. I said it without heat, just plainly. You've been doing it for years, and I think everyone in this room, if they're honest, has probably seen enough to know that what they just heard is not a surprise. Nobody disagreed. Margaret looked at Daniel. Daniel was looking at the table. She looked at her brother, her sister-in-law, her son's aunt. They were looking at their hands, their drinks, the middle distance. It was the first time in 9 years I'd watched Margaret look for support and find none. Sophia was in the back of the house with the other kids. She hadn't heard any of it. I told her on the drive home. Not all of it, she was 8, and some of it she would need years to fully understand. But the essential truth, that Grandma had been saying things that weren't fair, that some of what Sophia had been told about me wasn't true, and that none of it was Sophia's fault. Sophia was quiet for a long time in the back seat. Then she said, "Is that why you always seemed sad when I came home from her house?" I looked at her in the rearview mirror. "Yeah," I said, "that's why." She was quiet again. Outside, the highway lights passed in long orange stripes. "I did think you weren't around," she said finally. Her voice was small, careful. "But also, I always knew you made my lunch with the notes." I gripped the steering wheel. "I always read them," she said. I didn't trust myself to speak for a moment. "I know you did," I managed. She leaned her head against the window. I watched her in the mirror, this small, serious face, working through something too large for her age, trying to put the right pieces back where they belong. "Mom, yeah, I don't actually want Grandma to be my real mom." The highway stretched out ahead of us, cold and clear and open. "I know, baby," I said, and for the first time in 3 years, I believed it. Margaret did not come to our house again after that night. Not uninvited. Not with soup, not with vitamins. Not with opinions about bedtimes or screen time or the particular quality of my presence. Daniel and I spent several hard months in couples therapy, sitting across from each other and excavating things we'd both avoided for too long. He listened to File 31 again in a therapist's office this time with nowhere to look away to. He cried. I don't say that to punish him. I say it because it was real, and real things matter. We didn't fix everything. Maybe we won't. But we're trying in a different way now, with less avoidance, more honesty, less of the quiet diplomacy that had let so much damage accumulate in the spaces between us. Sophia started talking to a child therapist, a warm woman with a cluttered office and a fish tank. Sophia likes her. She comes home from those appointments quieter, but lighter. The way you feel after a long conversation that finally got somewhere. She still loves her grandmother. I haven't tried to take that from her. Children are not required to absorb our damage in full, and Sophia will make her own choices about that relationship when she's old enough to make them with clear eyes. What I've done is make sure she has clear eyes. She leaves me notes now sometimes. On the kitchen counter in the mornings, in crayon, before I wake up. Small observations, little jokes, drawings of the two of us with exaggerated features. I keep all of them. I kept the bad ones too. The months of distance, the careful silences, the closed bedroom door. I keep those in my memory, because they remind me what it cost to stop telling myself I was overreacting. I spent years being the most reasonable person in every room, giving benefit of the doubt, choosing calm over confrontation. The recordings changed that, not because they made me angry, though they did, because they showed me in 47 files that the war had been real the whole time. I'd just been the only one who wasn't fighting it.